Consistently, one of the loudest voices opposed to assisted suicide laws are advocates for people with disabilities. For many of us, their concerns might not be immediately obvious, but they are big ones, as we're about to learn. Joining us now is Lawrence Carter-Long, Communications Director with the Disability Education and Defense Fund. Lawrence, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Cindy, and thanks for covering the issue.
Lawrence, why is the disabled community so against assisted suicide laws? What's the connection?
I give you an example. Thomas Middleton was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, and he moved into the home of Tammy Sawyer in July of 2008. He died by assisted suicide that same month. 2 days after Thomas Middleton died, Sawyer listed his property for sale and deposited $90,000 into her own account. But even after a federal investigation into real estate fraud in which Sawyer was indicted for first-degree criminal mistreatment and aggravated theft, the Oregon state agency responsible for the assisted suicide law took no action. And in matters like these, literally matters of life and death, one mistake, one oversight, one person who falls through the cracks like Thomas Middleton is one person too many. Because once somebody kills themselves, of course, there's no going back. I can give you more examples. Jeanette Hall of Oregon was diagnosed with cancer in 2000, and she was told she had 6 months to a year to live. She knew about the assisted suicide law and even asked her doctor about it, but he encouraged her not to give up. 11 years later, she wrote, "I am so happy to be alive. If my doctor had believed in assisted suicide, I would be dead." Thankfully, Jeanette is alive and well, happy today, over 20 years later. I think we have to ask how many other Jeanettes are out there that we don't know about because they were pressured or depressed and acted hastily as a result. Sadly, we can't know. This much we do know. Profit motives are real. Barbara Wagner and Randy Stroke, both Oregonians with cancer, were informed by the Oregon Health Plan that the plan wouldn't pay for their chemotherapy, but it would pay for assisted suicide. More recently, disabled people are still being denied life-saving treatments due to things like crisis standards of care because of COVID. I can give you the case of Michael Hickson, who, according to projections from the hospital he was admitted to and killed by, had a 70% chance of survival. But he was removed from life support because of mistaken assumptions by a physician regarding his quality of life. That's real. Right now, dozens of times a year, parents are barely given a slap on the wrist for killing their disabled kids. This is seen as sad and acceptable. That's real. And so are the risks of legalizing physician-assisted suicide to disability communities, especially to those folks who are poor, people of color, isolated and alone, or otherwise marginalized. There are so many things that we just can't know, unintended consequences, unforeseen situations. Jeanette's case is but one of those where if people act sort of in that moment of crisis, in that moment of depression, you don't get a second chance. And I think we have not only a duty, but a responsibility, really, to be particularly careful about being watchdogs and looking out for these situations so that those unintended consequences don't occur, because you can't go back.
This is a bit of a tough issue, I think, for a lot of people, because I think a lot of people think those who are advocating for physician-assisted suicide are acting from a place of compassion. They see the extreme cases of somebody in a lot of pain. What do you say to those people?
I'd say that I understand that. I mean, but they probably don't understand the complexities of this issue. When we look at the reasons that people kill themselves through physician-assisted suicide, the main reason, the primary reason, is they don't want to become, or they don't want to be seen as a burden to their families or to their loved ones. Has nothing to do with pain and suffering, right? And so that gets to a deeper issue, to my mind. And that says, well, until we give the disability community the means, the resources, and the supports that they need to live, the right to die will remain a dangerous detour. It'll be a deadly distraction that teases and promises the illusion of choice, but in reality delivers something far more sinister.
So you mentioned the reason for wanting assisted suicide. There's a study in Oregon where family members rated the importance of 28 possible reasons why their loved ones would make that request, and pain was the 19th. And the top answers were things like wanting to control circumstance of death, fear of poor quality of life, loss of independence, loss of dignity, fear of inability to care for oneself in the future. There's also an issue about doctors not having a good understanding of what living with a disability is like, and perhaps are misrepresenting what that life could look like.
Right. So if you don't have somebody with the lived experience of disability, right, they're going to bring their own assumptions, their own prejudices. Every place where assisted suicide is legal, some people's lives, because of those biases and because of those misunderstandings, will be ended without their consent. This will be either through mistakes or abuse. It doesn't much matter because the end result is still the same. And even in the less than perfect sort of best case scenario, no safeguards have ever been enacted or even proposed to prevent that outcome. And the result, as we said before, can never be undone.
How did you yourself get involved in this advocacy work?
I've had cerebral palsy since I was born. So I was born in 1967, and it was a movie. I went to go see $1 Million Baby in 2003. I hate to give a spoiler alert here, but at the end of the movie, the protagonist becomes quadriplegic and begs her trainer, kind of a father figure, to kill her, which he does. And in the movie, he talks about putting her down like his old dog. That was shocking enough. But what really got me was as the lights went down and the credits started rolling, everybody else in the cinema started clapping and applauding, and I was shocked by that. My initial thought was, is this what they think about my life? And as I listened to people leaving the theater, they were saying things like, well, that's sad, but it's understandable. I wouldn't want to live my life like that. And I got kind of bitten by the bug, and I started researching and looking into the history of disability in cinema. And I started finding that, since 1915 up until about last year, there had been over 30 films, but I think 35 films that dealt with the issue of physician-assisted suicide. And in every one of those films, the disabled person is begging to be put down, to be killed, or to have somebody sort of deliver them from their misery. And so if that's the message, right, people are very influenced by media in ways that they don't even understand or that we don't often examine, where every story, every person has decided that they're better dead than disabled. What is the subliminal or the subconscious impact of that? So, the Nazis were very successful with this in the early 1940s. They had a film that really pushed killing people with ALS, and it was seen as a heroic act. And what the Nazis did in the 40s for propaganda, and they had eugenics programs which wiped out disabled people before they wiped out Jews or other marginalized populations, Hollywood is now doing for profit with movies like Me Before You. Disabled lives and the lives of disabled people are severely undervalued and severely misunderstood in our culture. People don't want to be seen as second-class citizens. They want to go to the restaurant, the same restaurant that they've gone, to with their friends every Thursday night after work for the last decade, and they find that they can't because they can't get up those stairs. And it's an adjustment, and it's kind of a shock to the system, even to people like Christopher Reeve, who, when he suffered his injury and became quadriplegic as a result of falling off a horse. This is the guy who played Superman, right? He decided, it says in his autobiography, that he wanted to die, but his wife wisely said to him, well, Chris, you just broke your neck. Maybe now's not the best time to make that decision. And then a few years later, he's probably more known now and widely respected now for what he did in terms of his advocacy than anything that he did as an actor. You look at people like Stephen Hawking, who's one of the premier theoretical physicists in the world ever, up there with somebody like Albert Einstein, who, when asked about having ALS, said that it gave him the luxury of having time to think. But it's a period of adjustment. It takes time to do that. If you make these decisions, we make these decisions in that moment of crisis, in that moment of being down or depressed, we'll never find out what we could be, right? And part of becoming what we could be, of making that transition, is getting connected with other disabled people, getting involved politically, getting involved with disability community, getting involved and becoming part of the political constituency that disabled people now are. But that takes adjustment. And so what we're hoping is, we see people of means and resources like Stephen Hawking or like Christopher Reeve, who had those opportunities to grow, who had those opportunities to evolve. Everybody deserves that chance. And we need to give disability communities the means, the resources, and the supports they need to live, rather than really pushing forward easier ways to die or making it easier for folks to put them down.
All right, Lawrence Carter-Long, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Be sure to watch the entire episode, now available exclusively at epochtv.com, a new completely censorship-free premium subscription platform, brought to you by the Epoch Times. See you there.